Hey, so this is the Drunkalogues, a podcast about addiction and recovery in which each guest shares their version of how it was, what happened, and how it is now, and then endures a half-hour Q&A at the hands of your host, Nick Morton. My next guest is the very funny and talented actor, writer, and improvisational genius, John Lehr. You may know him as the star and creator of the TBS series 10 Items or Less and the Hulu hit Quick Draw. When I first got sober, he was one of the very first phone calls that I made. He is a kind and generous human. Won't you please welcome John Lehr? Let's go.
All
John
right.
Lehr.
John Alcoholic. So like 22 years ago or so and change, I was arrested. I was on LSD in Ventura County celebrating my friend Melissa's 30th birthday, which is, what other way would you celebrate a birthday except drop acid, take a bunch of drugs, drink heavily, and go hiking in Ventura County. Where was it? It was in where's that artist community that everybody goes to? Anyway, so we were, and by the way, hiking.
Esalen.
It wasn't Esalen. Anyway, so we were hiking, which basically means you walk about 8 feet and sit down and look at dirt for 8 hours. And after 8 hours of looking at ants, we decided to get some more beer and go back to the campsite. I wanted more beer. We had a lot of liquor, but I wanted more. I was concerned that we didn't have enough. And when you're coming off acid, you definitely want to have enough. So we got in the car, and it was three of us, my friend Rick, Melissa, and myself. Melissa was this beautiful Puerto Rican woman who had no interest in having sex with either Rick or I. It was purely platonic. Rick was this tall, lanky, kind of cool guy, and I was a guy like myself with really long hair at the time, which I rocked. And we basically we were driving Rick's car, and it was a Saab that was, just beat up. Had the soap numbers on it that were written on the windshield denoting that it had been towed recently. And we pulled into the IGA to get more beer, and there must have been. I mean, the car was a rolling billboard saying "Arrest us, we're on drugs." I mean, it doesn't take a genius to figure out. I mean, and now that I'm sober and I see people driving, it's so funny. In fact, I was just on a plane with a guy who I did a bunch of blow with on the plane. And I was just like, what were we doing? What the fuck were we doing? I mean, it just amazes me that we didn't get arrested. So anyway, a cop pulls us over. He immediately knows I'm on something. He thinks I'm on meth because my pupils are so big.
Right.
So he gets me out of the car and has me do the meth test, which is you close your eyes, lean your head back, and when you think 30 seconds are up, you say now. And this is what somebody on meth does. Okay, now. Because they're so,
right.
speedy. But I was on acid, and I was able to bend time and space at my will, and I hit it on the nose at 30 seconds.
Wow, that's amazing.
And I could tell by the look on the cop's face. He was like, what is going on here? So he kind of gathers himself, and then he says, can I search you? And I know all the drugs are in the car, and I'm hoping that Rick and Melissa are eating all the drugs.
Right.
I mean, half of me is hoping. The other half is hoping I'll get out of this, and then we'll be able to take the drugs later. And I know I don't have any drugs on me, and I'm like, go ahead and search me. And he reaches into my pocket and pulls out a half pint of bourbon that's half finished.
Right.
And I remember thinking, oh, yeah, alcohol, like that was
right.
so a part of me. Like being an
right.
alcoholic was something I never had a problem admitting I was an alcoholic, at least after this night. That was never something I got all that hung up about. And I was just like, I was so aware that I just forgot. It was like having chapstick on me or having my wallet. And so immediately, because you can't drive with open liquor, immediately he calls all the cops and the dogs, and my friends did not eat the drugs. So we were, I was charged with possession of narcotics with intent to sell. There was a lot of narcotics with intent to sell, which I had no intention of selling any of them. I fully intended to put them all in my body that weekend. And, we spent the night in jail on acid and, which was very unpleasant. And my lawyer said, look, you're probably going to do some time in prison, or you're going to do some time in extended time in county or something.
Right.
You're looking at something here, because this was not the first time, and there was a lot of drugs found, and they're just not going to let you, walk on that.
Right.
So he said, look, why don't you go ahead and get in? I had a lawyer, this lawyer, he said, why don't you go ahead and get into AA or get into some program?
Right.
And because he's like, the judge will make you do that. He'll make you do that anyway. So why not get a head start on it? Maybe it'll help.
Right. And so you're back down in LA or wherever?
I'm back in LA now, and I'm out on bail.
Right.
And so I do. I check out the scene, and I didn't participate at all. Like, I wasn't interested in any of the cult stuff that was going on.
What was the first meeting?
It was in Silver Lake at the Tropical Cafe.
Right.
That was my very first meeting, which is like the strongest coffee, I think, still in all of LA.
Yeah, it'll fuck you up.
Yeah, and it was like, it was fine, but I was so concerned about me and about what was going to happen to me. Like, would I still be funny? Right. Would people still like me? Like, who am I without alcohol? My whole everything about it, all the culture, the music, the way I dressed, the people I hung out with, the places I went, everything was connected to that.
How old are you at this point?
30.
30, right.
So now, prior to that, I had been walking around. I was a devout atheist. I walked around drinking alone, which at this point, prior to this arrest, that was most of the time. I mean, the camp out was sort of an outlier event. Yeah. Most of the time, I was drinking alone. And when I was really wasted by myself, I would stare up at the universe and say, just make it stop. And this is as an atheist.
Right.
Like, just make it stop. If you make it stop, I'll never ask for anything else.
And when you say
again.
Make it stop, what?
The drinking.
The drink.
I just want to stop. And I'll never ask for anything else again. We'll go on our separate ways if you are out there.
And like, what did a typical day look like at that point?
I was pretty functional. Like, I could get a few things done, because I'm very organized and I'm very OCD and I'm very good at juggling things. So I could get my day done really quickly and get right on to drinking. But some days I would just drink the day away. Right. That happened a lot. I got high every day. Right. I got drunk every day. Right. I got wasted pretty much every day. I mean, it was some nights were a little less so, but most of the nights involved, starting drinking at home and then ending up somewhere. I love horrible dive bars. I loved that wine bar which isn't really a dive bar, but it's a weird bar, which I liked. That wine and beer bar that's in the farmer's market on 3rd and Fairfax. Yeah. It opened at 11 a.m., which I loved. And it closed at like 2, which I love. They have meetings
there, don't they? Maybe
now they do, upstairs.
Upstairs, yeah.
I remember getting so wasted there and waking up in the nut count, where they sell the mixed nuts. Waking up behind there and actually trying to drive my car through the farmer's market because they had locked the gates. And I was driving a 1964 Volvo at the time, which was very narrow. And I thought I knew the gate on the other side was broken and unlocked. So if I could get my car, so I tried to drive my car through the farmer's market. So, things like this, waking up in yards. Right. I was very friendly, so people most of the time liked to hang out with me until it got late in the night. Right. And then I turned really dark, and I had lots of friends who didn't want to hang out with me anymore, a lot of interventions, those kinds of things. So, yeah. So, anyway, When I got sober, and I went as soon as I decided. From the night I was arrested, I haven't had a drink. No, I had one the next day.
Right.
I had a scotch and a joint. But, I just got out of prison. I'm in jail. I'd spent the night in jail on acid. I mean, I needed a little something. But then after that was it. That was it for me. And looking back, I sort of can see how it was coming. I mean, I was very alone. I was very sick and tired of being sick and tired. I was ready. And honestly, when I thought I got sober, I thought I had decided to. I thought it was just me, and I decided to get sober. And, as soon as that drinking was removed, that promise that I made to the universe where I was like, I'm not going to ask for anything else, went away immediately. I was just like, no, now I want to be happy.
Right.
And my focus went immediately to being happy.
Right.
And I was not at all. I was miserable. I mean, I was more miserable. And I was, this is when I was just white knuckling it and getting into arguments with the only people who even cared about me anymore. And
this is like early sobriety.
Yeah, the first 3 years of my sobriety, I didn't I didn't treat it at all.
Did you go to meetings?
Occasionally, but not really.
Right.
And I didn't read anything, and I didn't go regularly, and I didn't do I didn't join the cult at all.
So, but I mean, what happened with the court case?
It all got dropped. They screwed up. They
wow.
Fucked
what
up
did they
on
do?
The search. Something was wrong with the search that my lawyer found.
Right. So they illegally searched you. So all that stuff.
They even dropped the DUI. I didn't even get a parking ticket.
You got nothing.
Nothing. And that had something to do with it in my mind because I was like, oh my God, this is like, I'm not superstitious, but
right.
Jesus Christ, and I thought that was going to be the beginning of being happy for me because at that point, I thought happiness meant, bliss, nirvana for the rest of my life. I defined happiness as the absence of any pain forever for the rest of my life. So I thought the charges getting dropped was just the beginning. And now I was going to get a great job, and all this shit was just going to start to flow because I wasn't drinking.
And what were you doing for work?
I was substitute teaching in South Central.
Really?
Yes.
Wow.
A really hateful job.
When you're substitute teaching, are you there every day pretty much?
I mean, it was a great job because I could go when I wanted to and not go when I didn't want to, and it paid pretty well, decent. I mean, and now that I'm not spending any money on drinking, I'm saving a little bit of money. I mean, I'm broke and I owe everywhere and I'm in massive debt, but the cash flow is sort of happening.
How long had you been living in LA at that point?
Let's see, 92 to so about 6 years.
6 years.
Is that right?
And where had you come from?
Yeah, from wait, is that right? Yeah, I think that's about right. From Chicago. I've been in Chicago for 8 years. And
where'd you go to? Did you go to college in Chicago?
Yeah,
in Chicago,
I went to Northwestern in Chicago, and then I stayed for 4 years.
And so, were you doing improv shit there? And was that a big scene? Was it Was it cool to be a part of that?
Oh, it was awesome, and it was It was nightlife, way nightlife, crazy nightlife, and partying after.
So, what was did you go to Northwestern knowing that you were going to do acting shit?
No.
So you sort of came into that.
Yeah. I went to Northwestern to be a teacher, and then my mom convinced me to double.
She convinced you
to double major and apply to the theater program.
What kind of fucking mother tells their child to be an actor?
She knew I wanted to do it.
Right.
And I had toyed around with maybe a double major. Maybe they didn't have minors.
Right.
So I thought about it. But she was the one who really encouraged me to audition. You have to audition.
Right.
And so I did.
And did you have training at that point? I mean, had you been acting in high school?
Yeah, I'd acted in high school. And I did some summer programs at a children's theater,
right.
A little bit. But I was in Kansas.
Did you feel like the Northwestern kids they had more they were all castrati and shit?
Oh yeah, they were super. I never met wealth like that.
Right.
That was when cocaine really came into my life, which I loved.
Yeah.
I'd never been around people with that kind of money before.
So, and in Kansas, did you drink?
Yeah, I started in high school, probably at 15. And
would you get blackout drunk when you were 15?
Yeah, on the weekends.
Right.
But I was able to kind of hold it together.
Did you get in trouble in your teens? I mean, you made it to Northwestern, so you must have been okay, right?
The worm had started to turn right when I graduated.
Right.
And then I was able to skate out on all the stuff that I had done prior to that, and I already got accepted. So I was still, but it had gotten bad, like throwing up and vomiting, passing out, blackout.
Were you like the worst in your crowd?
Yeah, because I would never stop.
Right. Were people worried about you? I mean, you're such a likable guy.
Yeah, I don't remember them being all that worried about me. I mean, I hung out with a small group of kind of oddballs in Kansas, kind of intellectual or thought we were.
What town are we in Kansas?
We're Overland Park.
Right.
And
I don't know where that. I say right, like I understand where that is.
It's in Kansas City. It's a suburb of Kansas City, Kansas. Right. It's very fancy now. Yeah. I lived not in the fancy part. I lived in the we were okay.
Right.
But not like it is now.
Yeah.
But my friends were one of my friends went on to be a prosecutor, oddly. One went on to be a French major. They were oddballs because you don't really do that kind of stuff. And they all moved out of Kansas, which doesn't really happen.
And then, so you get to Northwestern. Your mom gets you to apply to the acting program.
Yeah.
I've left the format of this podcast completely now.
Good.
So
I'm down with that.
Sorry,
no
listeners. And so. I mean, I know you, and I think the world knows you as this, improvisational actor. How do you end out discovering improv?
Well, okay, so at Northwestern, they had it because it's in Chicago, and improv was everywhere in Chicago.
And it was already huge in Chicago.
Yeah,
then?
because Second City is there,
right? Yeah,
and the Practical Theater, and a lot of kind of famous improv, but improv hadn't been on TV or film anywhere.
Right. It was a thing.
It was a way people saw it as a kind of an entertaining nightclub thing, and then you do some improv games between sketches. That's what Second City was doing. And it was all about the sketches and the characters that you would create hoping you'd get on Saturday Night Live.
Right.
That was basically
the scene. And so when you...
But I didn't care about the sketches at all.
Right. You were just, you liked the games.
I liked the improv because I loved how, and it's directly connected to my alcoholism. I loved the darkness. I loved the fear. I loved the abyss. I loved the not knowing.
Totally.
I loved it. You know what I mean? I loved that.
I totally know that.
The thing that everybody else hated about it, I loved that about it.
And so where were you doing it? So where was it going down?
So I auditioned, when I got out of college, I auditioned for Second City, and I did their training center and stuff, but I hated it. It was all about the sketches. Women, you'd have in every group there'd be a fat guy, a skinny guy, a gay guy, a black guy, and one woman. Who would play the four characters.
Mean, compared to, network television, that's not so bad.
Not so bad, yeah. It was more diverse than network television. But it was still just lame, and I just didn't like it. Now, Second City has gone on to kind of catch on to – they've caught up.
Right.
But at that time, it was the early days of what now is called long-form improvisation. Right. We didn't know that.
Right.
But it started in Chicago, and people were experimenting with this idea of making improv be a full theater show.
Right.
And not games, and be more about scenes. And, I ended up with a group of people that was 4 women and 3 men, which was very rare.
Right.
We became kind of a hit. We got rave reviews.
What was the name of your thing?
It was called Ed.
Ed.
E-D.
Right.
Yeah.
That's nice.
Some
That's cool.
improv
Nice and
nerds
simple.
know that. And that went on to be a hit show. Like we were performing at the Remains Theater, which
Right.
was like 250 seats, which Improv had
cool.
never seen that before, ever, like in a theater.
And would you get fucked up for shows?
When I was in college and when I was doing bar gigs, always.
Right.
But when Ed came on, we were like into it. We like took it seriously.
You're getting paid,
And,
right?
well, very little.
Right.
It wasn't about that, but
Right.
it was a smash hit, and we were
Right.
kind of the toast of the town. I mean, it was a big deal for a bunch of
And
weird
how
actors.
how far out of college are you when Ed starts to kind of hit?
Maybe a year or
Right.
two.
Oh, wow, that's great.
Yeah, maybe two.
And are you teaching at that point
Yes,
as well?
I'm substituting
Right.
during the day. So
Right.
but then when the show finishes, we go out and drink till 4 in the morning, 5 in the
Oh my
morning.
God, that must have been amazing.
It was amazing. And then I would sleep for maybe an hour or just shower and go to teach elementary school.
Well, you shower. That's good.
And then I would teach elementary school, get out at 3, go home and sleep,
Right.
and then show
Start
up
it
at
up
the theater
again.
and start it up
Man,
again.
that
It was
just-
awesome.
That sounds amazing.
It was so much fun.
And
But it started to turn a little bit there. And then
was there a moment when like booze? Like I had a thing with booze where I got when I was 18. Like I saw into the abyss, and I was like, "Oh, this is really dangerous for me." I mean, it took me 22 more years to get sober, but like I knew. I drank a hole in my stomach when I was 18, and I knew then. I was like, "Shh, this thing is fire for you, but whatever, kid, you'll wrestle it."
I did. I was so ambitious.
Right.
With the acting thing, that because as long as that was going well, I didn't give a shit.
Right.
That was a big
That's
part of it.
interesting. Yeah, that's
and,
cool.
And it was really only when I got out to LA and things started to,
Peter out.
I'm in the
Yeah.
big leagues now,
Yeah.
and you can't just dick around. That's when I started to see it. But there was always a small voice. I knew I was different. I knew I drank differently from everybody, or most everybody around
sure.
me. I would find other people who drank the way I did.
I would be at college bars, and like they'd get my pint, and you could see how many sips I took to go through a pint, and
Yeah.
it was like 6.
Yeah.
They'd be like
Yeah.
this big, and my friends would be like, "What the fuck, Morton?" I'm like this like basically prepubescent guy still, skinny, and they'd be like, "Yeah, I don't know, this just feels good, right?"
Or would you order 2? Sometimes I would just order 2 so I'd be ready.
There was I just felt like in college there was so much booze around.
Yeah.
I never really worried
I was always
about
afraid
it.
of running out. I always
Yeah,
wanted to
yeah.
make sure I had it there.
I had moments like that where, I remember like packing my bags in high school. It was more in high school just because it was harder. It was rarer to come by. But I
Yeah.
remember like, I'd pack my bags to go back to school, and I'd be like, how many bottles can I shove into this bag?
Yes. Yeah.
I was definitely freaked out more then than when I got to college. But so then at what point do you decide like, I'm taking this to LA?
A talent scout from Fox heard about that. Now, after that show, Ed, the same director and theater company, did another show, a follow-up show, and it was a 2-person improv show. Me and another guy.
Right.
And it was super fast.
Right.
And stream of conscious, but also it had a bit of a narrative to it.
Right.
And it was as the first show, the ensemble show, was more of a critical darling, whereas the 2-person show was much more of a commercial.
What was that
hit.
called?
It was called The Chris Hogan Show.
Chris Hogan, right.
And he's a friend of mine, and
Sure.
there were a lot of one-man shows at the time,
Right.
so it was a 2-person one-man show.
That's funny.
So I sort of played his alter ego
Right.
and kind of I would pull out of him. And then it was interesting. It was an interesting show. It was very psychological based.
That sounds amazing.
And it was a great show. And this talent scout heard about it, came out to Chicago, saw the show, and said, "I want to fly you to LA for a showcase."
Right.
And we were like, and by this point, we were like, we wanted money now.
Yeah,
It's like,
yeah,
this is
right.
not fun anymore,
Yeah,
man.
yeah.
We've been doing this for like 4 years.
We're broke. And
We're
like,
broke,
yeah.
and I'm tired of being broke.
Yeah.
And I just want health insurance and
Right.
whatever.
Yeah.
And so she flies us out. We do the show. We didn't realize it, but we did it for every executive in town. We ended
That's
up
amazing.
after the show
Where did you do it?
at a theater here in town.
Right.
I can't remember the Odyssey.
Right.
The Odyssey.
Yeah. I don't know where that is, but I
it's
hear
over-
actor people talking about it.
It's on the west side.
Right. Oh yeah. I've been there actually. I think it's over here on
Yes,
Sepulveda.
it's close.
Yeah.
So we did it there and signed with ICM, signed with 3 Arts Management.
Wow.
Ended up out of that parlaying that into a holding deal with NBC. Now they don't do holding deals anymore, but
right.
This was where they would just pay you
to be available to them.
To be available to them and to no one else.
They should do them. Now they need them more than ever.
I know.
They should do them
They
anyway.
paid us each $15,000, which is nothing. But at the
time, it's like,
oh my God, I had never seen that kind of money ever in one check.
Right.
And I just blew it all on blow and drugs and alcohol. It was amazing.
And so you come out, when you came out to do the showcase, you were like, we're here. Like you didn't, or were you like, oh, we're going to come out and then we'll do the showcase and maybe we'll leave? Or were you just like, we're coming to LA?
I don't know. I mean, like I just followed the energy.
Right.
And it seemed, I guess if you'd asked me at the time, I probably would have been, I don't know.
Right.
But I would think in the back of my head, I was like, I mean, you're here.
Right.
I mean,
It's on. Right. We've been doing this in Chicago for real. Like,
and we're getting called into all these meetings and everything, and they kind of see us as writer creators as well as performers. So we're pitching stuff, which all this stuff I'd never done before.
Right.
The problem is that the guy, Chris, and I were not really partners.
Right.
We had just been cast in a show.
What happened to the other? Was Chris in the original thing? He was a part of that 7 people Ed show. And where are those people now? Are they all dead?
Some of them are out here. No, none of them are dead. They're all alive. Some of them are in New York. They're spread out over the country. But yeah. So anyway, we did not. I mean, we weren't built to work together at all.
Sure.
Plus, I'm on drugs and alcohol.
Yeah.
So there's like the real issues between us.
Right.
And then on top of that, I'm just a fuck up. And so it just crashed and burned. And we ended up getting a show. The only thing we could end up getting out of all of that energy was a show on E! Called News Weasels.
Sounds amazing. Did it actually?
It aired for like 6 episodes.
And was it you guys together?
It was us together delivering the news.
Is it available on YouTube? No,
it's nowhere.
That's too bad. I would love to see that.
I know it should be, but it was terrible because the idea was great. It was about making fun of the news, and we were going to improvise, and it was going to be really loose and edgy. Right. The problem was that they screwed up and couldn't get the rights to the news, so we ended up having to do the show with only public domain stories. Right. So during the OJ thing.
Right. That's where we are.
Our show is about doing beer contests in Australia because that's all we could get footage on.
Right.
Like we could talk about the OJ thing, but we couldn't show anything.
Right. And like everyone's obsessed with OJ, so it's like how we're not going to watch
it was
News
the
Weasels.
Stupidest thing.
Right.
Yeah, it just went crash and burn. But it got me, some money to be able to live on, and then I just kind of bounced around because the drinking was getting more and more and more by this time.
Right.
And I'm landing a couple of things here and there. I landed a Friends and a Lois and Clark, and I was in some acting gigs, and then I was in some Noah Baumbach movies, and then he asked me to do some ghostwriting for him.
Right,
and I started to write, and I realized I could write, and this is even when I was drinking. I realized I could write, especially dialogue, which a lot of people have trouble with, and there's a need for that. Sure. And I was pretty good with structure too. I just had it came naturally, and. Anyway, I ended up, selling a script to NBC that never went, but, it was a pilot script to NBC and producing another show, and it's kind of had a couple things going. Right. But not really. Not really. Right. They were here and there. Right. And the drinking was just more and more and more. And I was basically just a substitute teacher who was an alcoholic.
And had some shit happening in Hollywood.
A little bit. Enough to keep me from killing myself.
Right. Which is important.
With a gun.
That's important.
But I was just doing it with drugs anyway. I was so depressed.
Yeah. And so you go to that first meeting and you don't have a aha eureka moment in it. You're kind of like.
Not at all.
You're just. It's so weird that you stayed sober.
I know. It was just, it's just a miracle. It really is. Because I didn't do anything about it.
But it was like, how many days sober were you when you went to that first meeting?
Oh my God. Oh, Jesus.
4, right?
Yeah.
So I think my first meeting, I was about 4 days.
Oh, I can remember it too. It was in the Tropical, and it was all these, it was an alcoholic thing, but it was all ex-heroin addicts.
Oh, really?
Who were hot with tattoos, and there were women. Because heroin addicts who have families that are giving them money, they can hold up pretty good. For a while.
Yeah, sure. It doesn't wreck you the way alcohol does.
Well, it does it will.
Right.
But all of these guys they all had their teeth, and what I mean? They just looked, and they were cool. They were musicians and tattoos. This is before tattoos were.
Did you do heroin at all?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Amazing.
I never got to do that.
Don't do it. It's fantastic.
Yeah, I guess I'll never get that chance now.
You won't.
I mean,
I just heard about a new drug.
Yeah.
I was just in Akron, Ohio, the birthplace of AA.
Really?
Yes.
I didn't realize it was the birthplace
Yes,
of AA.
it is.
I mean, I guess I knew that somewhere in the back of my head.
Yes, and I was talking to these guys who were talking about wasping. Wasping is taking wasp spray that you use, that spray you use to shoot up at a wasp nest.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've ever operated. It's pretty fun to do.
Right.
I did it once. You spray that on a window screen. You run electricity through the window screen, and it causes the chemical to flake up, crystallize, and then you smoke that.
That's a lot of work.
Wasping.
I just like to take the wasp thing and stick it right up my butt.
Yeah,
that's
just do same thing.
Yeah,
same
you
thing.
just absorb it,
or in your eye. Just put it right in your tear duct.
So anyway, you go 3 years sitting in the tropical and presumably other rooms.
Yeah.
And at some point, do you have a revelation?
Well, the way I knew. I was, I knew I was causing problems with people,
right.
Getting in fights. I mean, I always say I caused more damage after I was sober.
That's amazing.
Heavily caffeinated.
Right, sure. And just like full of rage.
Just tearing people new assholes about how they should be treating me.
Righteous sobriety or whatever.
Oh,
I guess
God.
that's like.
And when you're truly right, I mean, when you're actually right, that's when it's the most dangerous. And you're right. And you're really right.
Right.
And you're caffeinated and you're just digging into somebody who
and I
is
mean,
wrong.
In retrospect, I mean, would you say that the being right is not that important?
Yeah.
It seemed to be what you're implying is that like you can be right all the fuck you want.
I fall in that trap all the time. Still.
That's amazing.
It's very difficult to negotiate the world without caring about what's right and what's not right. There are times when it's needed for you to have an opinion.
Yeah.
And it's sort of like what I imagine people who are food addicts, where you have to still imbibe the thing that you're addicted to.
Yeah.
It's sort of the same thing with being right. You still have to have that, because if you're, say you're on a project and you have a strong opinion about the way something should go, you're being paid for that opinion.
Yeah.
But I will then at times, and I never know when, or I have some, I know when the odds are higher, but I'll sometimes just turn into a dick,
Right.
And it's just like, fuck, I hate that. And then I'll go back and apologize and try to make it right.
Right.
It's horrible. And it still happens. And it usually happens when I'm not eating,
right.
Or, when I'm
totally.
hungry, or when I'm caffeinated.
Yeah.
Or, when
what
I'm
are those things they
stressed
say?
or tired,
Halt, hungry, angry, lonely,
tired. So those, and then I would put an S on the front, and sick too. Like if I'm sick,
I like to put a U in there too, which is need to urinate.
Showelt, or
halts.
Or halts. Halts you, but you need the U.
The U, HAULTS.
I love that. Halts. That's good.
It's sort of like LGBTQA, whatever. There's just all things. Like, let's just keep, eventually we'll do AA, BB, whatever. So
it was during that time when it's just happening more and more and more, and nobody wants to be around me.
Right.
And I went to this bachelor party in Vegas with a bunch of comedy writers, which sucks because, as you know, they can be the most unfunny, boring, horrible people to be around.
Brutal.
I mean, they can't laugh if their life depends on it. And they're all rich, and I'm broke. Ugh. And we go to the strip bar, and I'm, going to a strip bar sober is completely different, like
I've
what
done it. Yeah.
It sucks.
It sucks.
Yeah.
I was
you see the backstory of
not
the women.
into it. It was super depressing.
Filthy. And here's the thing that I realized. I'm getting a boner that I can't do anything about with all of my straight male friends. Like, what the fuck am I doing here? What kind of homoerotic, twisted thing is this all about?
I guess the last time I went, I didn't get a boner. I was more just like, I can't afford this. Like,
right. No. I'm saying, but the point
every time they asked me for money, I was like, I want to give you money, but like, this is such a racket. Like, this is worse than any sort of timeshare
for what
sales
point?
job.
I mean, give me my phone. I'll go in a stall and take care of myself in 15 seconds. I don't need this.
I mean, the point of it does seem to be like the homoerotic side of it. Like, we're all into this together. Like, right? Yeah. We're all getting big boners.
Yeah. It's like a gangbang.
Totally.
It's like a visual gangbang, but it's all reach arounds.
Right.
Everybody's just but yeah, so anyway, I was there and one of the guys that I'm drinking, sodas and limes and some guy knows, and this one guy comes up to me and he goes, "Hey, are you a friend of Bill's?" Which is code.
Right.
And I was like, "Bill? I don't know what Bill." And so he got me into the program.
A better, like a real meeting with like a real sponsor
thing.
And like really
and I was
into
ready
the whole
for
thing.
It.
And
It happened in the same way that I got sober after I was arrested. I mean, it wasn't like getting arrested was all that big of a deal. I mean, it was a big deal, and I was scared, and I didn't want to go to jail. I just didn't want to do that. But there were other things that had happened prior to that. Why hadn't they caused me to get sober? I mean, and the same thing with like getting really involved in my treatment. Like, I don't know why it was then. I mean, there were other times. It just happened.
That's interesting.
And I'm, and now I have a spiritual, sort of connection that I, chalk that up. I just kind of shove that out there and be like, I don't know.
Right.
I'm not gonna have an opinion on what went down there because all I know is it wasn't me. Right.
But you feel like, I mean, I don't know when they say, I mean, in AA, you're supposed to put your faith in what a higher power, right? And I mean, my higher power is chaos. Like I'm happy to let the chaos take its course and not have to like steer the fucking Millennial Falcon through the asteroid field. I'm like, one of the asteroids might hit us. I'm fine with that.
Yeah,
that's just
great.
Like,
I love that. I love that.
Well, so it's hard for me to believe that there's a benevolent hand guiding it. I get a lot of relief just from knowing I don't have to steer, and that is, and that there are things bigger than me at play, and whatever. Like
that's hey, whatever works.
Yeah, whatever works.
Yeah. I feel. Over time, and it's been 20 years, and this has been a long journey, and it started with a thread, connection.
That's amazing.
Because I came in with a total atheist.
Yeah.
So the spiritual thing was just, at first, was just like very, very basic. And then over the years, I've wrapped more concepts around that, and then unwrapped them that I don't like, and I've learned and listened, and now I have sort of where it's a version of what you're saying, but there's a connection there that kind of flows two ways.
Right.
It's hard to talk about this shit without sounding like a
crazy.
nut
I know
job.
my sponsor did say to me, when I was talking to him about my feeling of chaos, and he's like, but imagine behind the chaos, there's a benevolent force. And I was like, God, am I capable of imagining that? I just don't. I mean, I feel like I'll be fine. Like no matter what happens, I worry about everyone around me, but I'll always be fine. Like
of course, and maybe it's my experience with that kind of stuff with sponsees. I sponsor a lot of guys.
Right.
Is it what it boils down to is semantics.
You're
not really talking about whether there is or there isn't.
Right.
What you're really talking about is how we talk about whether there is or isn't.
Right.
And I just feel like we get bogged down in that stuff so much.
Yeah.
And there's plenty of people who feel like, redefining spiritual terms for yourself is the first step towards finding your own path in all of this.
Right.
So
yeah.
that, okay, benevolent hand. I mean, when I hear benevolent hand, I think of like Star Trek episodes where like giant, there was an episode where there were gods where he was big and
Right.
could do, like that just sounds crazy to me.
Right.
But if I redefine benevolent hand,
Right.
okay, I redefined it as something, the unknowability
Right.
of the infinite.
Yeah, sure.
That just as much is totally random as it is not.
Right.
Like it's unknowable.
Yeah.
Like once I go down that, I'm feeling pretty good.
I did there's a lot of people who come into the program and they have this, they have these religious ideas that they were raised with, whether that's Catholicism or Episcopalian, whatever, Judaism, and they have to struggle with, making sense of that. And like, I don't have that. And I really just couldn't imagine like how you can reconcile like the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous with like, a Catholic God. But then I was in a meeting once and I was imagining this, and it was a Wednesday, and it was Ash Wednesday. And I had this thought, like, what if I turned my will over to that, right? And I was like, I'm going to stop masturbating and looking at porn for whatever.
Oh, right. I remember this.
And I wrote a screenplay.
Yes.
And I was like, well, geez. I mean, it was sort of revelatory to me.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, there is a way that this could work. But
there's stuff going on. There's stuff going on. And that's what I'm talking about, the unknowability.
Yeah.
Like,
and the language of it too. Like,
right, the language can really freak you out.
Sometimes don't think about that.
It's not good branding.
But so then, like, do you find one of the things that I'm always interested in, like one of AA's like great sales tools is that fear of economic uncertainty what is the word they say, will leave us? Something.
Well, I don't know. I'm terrible at
but it goes away,
shit.
Whatever.
Yes.
So did you find over like, so you have those 3 years of white knuckling it, and then you find a more connected sort of path through your sobriety. In that period, was your life getting better? I mean, certainly you weren't getting arrested. Like I find, like, I don't go to the emergency room anymore, so like that's $5,000 a year I don't spend anymore.
Yeah. And you immediately see the money that you're able to save, and I could see moderate improvements, but my untreated side of myself always saw the negative first. And I always saw the worst case scenario first, and it took years and years and years
before you were like,
started to get a taste of what I've now termed happiness, which is like peace.
Right.
And it comes more often than ever, but the other comes too. Like the way I look at it is it's like a cosine curve. Like the frequency is less. And the intensity is less, but it's still
It's
you
still
roll
a roller
on this side
coaster,
of the
right?
boat, and then you go over. Got to roll on the other side. It requires tending and
I mean, like, just to come back to your career a little bit, did you whatever that creative relationship fell apart in part because you guys weren't really a partnership, and in part because you were using drugs and alcohol. Did you find you were able to show up better for your career?
Oh, definitely.
Because you weren't fucked up all the time?
Oh, my God, yes. I got so much more done. And it took a long time, though. It just didn't happen right away, which really bummed me out.
How long was it? Like, what would you say? Like, was there a moment where you're like, this is the moment where my career has finally, like, turned the corner?
No.
Really? You didn't feel like 10 items or less was like...
Oh, yeah, I mean, there were certain things that when I sold my own show that I'm starring in, that's on
what was
TBS.
That was 10 items or less, right?
But you know how it is. Yes, it was. But prior to that, I had sold pilots, and I was on a show called Jesse. I was a series regular on
so
an
good
NBC
shit was
show.
happening.
So little, you know how it works. It's like
and
an
you think,
overnight success that took
10 years.
10 years,
right?
And that isn't really that much of success.
Yeah.
If you factor out, you divide all the hours you put into it by the amount of money you make, you're still barely making minimum wage, probably.
It is true, but I mean, you get to do something that you enjoy, which
That's
is, so much of the battle. I mean, as I look at raising kids, and I'm like, well, what do I want my kids to have? Like, I don't want them to be, I don't care if it doesn't matter how rich you are. There's so many unhappy rich people. I mean, it's really like, if
there's
you can
a
find
lot of unhappy rich people.
There's a lot of unhappy poor people though too.
Yes, that's true.
So, I mean, if you're going to be,
numbers are.
if you're going to be unhappy, it's better to be rich probably than unhappy and poor.
Sure.
So,
but I wonder what the percentage, the share of unhappy rich is to unhappy poor.
Proportionally speaking.
Mm-hmm. It's probably worse to be poor.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, better. I think they have done studies about it where if you can get above a certain income level, then it becomes irrelevant. Like if you can put a roof over your head and pay your rent,
once your needs
not
are
be
met.
completely stressed out about everything, that actually does quantify into some sort of happiness quotient that is then becomes, then it's more about, you're probably all the stuff that we deal with of, spirituality and chemicals and whatever else is going on in the spectrum of happiness. So, I keep hoping in these interviews that someone's gonna there's gonna be this revelation and that someone's gonna crystallize the whole thing. But there
are people out there who can do that. I mean, I've been to workshops and things where people talk, and it's like, whoa, that makes so much sense.
No, but I mean, what you're saying, this notion which you started with, that happiness, you viewed it as, and I think a lot of people do, as this kind of
an orgasm.
Yeah, or like a fault line you cross, or like a the edge of a cliff, and once you get beyond this thing, then it's going to be all happiness.
Right.
And that just doesn't exist.
No.
And
it does, but you have to pay money for it and you get addicted to it. It does exist in heroin.
Right.
But the problem is there are other downsides.
Oh, yeah, you pay
serious
you pay a pretty hefty price for that. And I think that even when you talk about your career and you say, well, was there a moment when there was this huge success, and you're like, well, no, there was a whole process to get there, this process that you're still going through now, and that is the process of being happy. It's something that you actually have to work to maintain, and that you have to continue to explore what is meaningful to you.
It's process. I mean, that's really what I've learned through all of this, is that process is important.
Well, I find in comedy, process is product. I mean, particularly in improv.
Yeah,
process that is,
sure.
And in stand up, I don't know. I'm still struggling to make sense of what stand up is, but I do feel like process is product there as well.
Yeah.
And if you're not enjoying the day to day of that, then you should probably do something else.
That's right. It should be fueling the next thing.
Yeah.
Somehow.
Well, John, you have to get on to your evening meeting.
Yes,
they serve dinner there, right?
Yes, they do.
Is it good? Is it edible?
Sometimes it is, sometimes it's not.
Where does it come from? Is someone
different
in charge?
People, different commitments.
And
they make a dinner
they
every
make
Thursday.
It. They can't just go down to the local
every now and then
pita
that'll
place
happen. Somebody will bring pizza, which is fine.
Right.
I'm fine with pizza.
Yeah, you want that sometimes.
Sometimes it's hot dogs. Other times it's been super fancy. There was a few nights where there was steaks.
See, you hear that? $1 and you get a steak.
Well, they suggested donation of $4 for the food.
I came to that meeting once. You weren't there. It's interesting. You weren't there, but and I think when I came into AA, when I was trying to get sober, I kept thinking that there was going to be a shaman who was going to lead me through this. And you get that ultimately. You find a sponsor, and if you're lucky, you get a good sponsor who can take you through the steps and everything else. And you sent me to that meeting, and I didn't have a great experience. Sometimes that happens.
That happens.
My last guest, Tommy Swerdlow, said when you're trying to get, if you want it, if you don't want it, it doesn't matter what anyone says. It's not going to make a difference. If you do want it, it doesn't matter what anyone says. It's not going to make a difference.
That's so true. And when you don't want it, sometimes other things are at work there that help you want it later on.
Yeah, exactly.
Whether you're reacting to it or you pick up, you change no matter what.
Well, thanks, John. That was great. Nick.